Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today on the What Fuels You podcast, I'm here with my friend Jonathan Sposato. He's a serial entrepreneur, author, investor, and CEO. Originally pre-law, Jonathan changed paths in his early 20s and soon after became the first person in history to sell 2 companies to Google. A few years ago, Jonathan made headlines by announcing he would only invest in female-founded companies and took it a step further when he wrote the incredibly inspiring book, Better Together. He is currently the chairman of PicMonkey and Geekwire. He's a husband, a father, a fashion icon, and a friend to so many of us. We are lucky to have you here today. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Shauna. And I have to say that, first of all, very, very warm intro. I appreciate it. But you have the most lovely podcast voice.
I do?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? My dad has this like crazy radio voice.
Yeah.
He could probably be doing that.
Yeah.
And I think he just has to figure out how.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah. It's a different deal when you can hear your friend's voice through headphones.
Yeah,
So,
well, thank you. It's
Bravo.
soothing. Don't fall asleep. We're going to start with rapid fire to keep you awake.
Okay.
You ready? Favorite podcast?
The What Fuels You podcast.
That's sweet. You haven't heard it yet, dude. You better make it good.
That's right.
Favorite European city?
Barcelona.
Favorite designer?
Close one between Margiela and...
I love Margiela.
Oh, there's so many.
Yeah.
You know what?
You look pretty cute in your Montclair today, I have to say.
Thank you, but Ambush.
Oh, I don't know Ambush.
Yeah,
All
check
right.
it out.
Very cool.
Also Sakai. I'm into Sakai lately.
Favorite movie director?
Toss-up between Ennio Morricone and Ridley Scott.
Interesting.
2 different genres.
Very interesting. Of course. You're like the cool guy. Okay. So what are you currently reading?
Oh, I'm currently in an unfinished state across several books. I'm revisiting Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited because I think it's a beautiful book. Similar but more American is The Great Gatsby.
Oh, The Great Gatsby.
Yeah, that's
Bringing
right.
it back, old
yeah,
school.
that's right. So it's kind of fun to read those in parallel.
Yeah, well, your cool office, I feel like, has some good books. And I feel like you can learn a lot about somebody, and I'm not surprised that yours is a wide range. What fuels you?
Helping others.
I love that.
That's the top one I have found. Took me a while to figure that out, but if you can genuinely help people and people, whether it's people you know or people you don't know at all, total strangers, I think that's what fuels me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that answer. That's awesome. Okay, so as we were walking in, I mentioned to you that you are kind of an open book. You're a person who's very comfortable being vulnerable, comfortable being open, and kind of owning who you are. Were you always like that, or is that Jonathan at age 51? Just really comfortable.
You know what?
I've
never been asked that question. I think the seeds of that person were probably there when I was young. I always felt like I didn't fit in. And quite frankly, the reason, I'll reference Evelyn Waugh and also F. Scott Fitzgerald, because we talked about those books. I've always felt like the outsider. So any sort of fiction or story where the central protagonist is an outsider, I'm more of a Nick Carraway than a Jay Gatsby.
Interesting. And do you still feel that way?
Absolutely, I do.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
You are the center.
No, not at all. There are places I go where I'm still scratching my head like,
gosh, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't know this happened every
That's
year or on a regular basis with these people.
That's interesting.
And
I always think of you as like, when you read those magazines, like who would you want at the dinner table? Like you're that person.
Oh, that's very.
It's true.
What that means a lot coming from you, Shauna, because I think of you that way.
Well,
as the person you want to have.
And Heather too, by the way.
That's right.
Heather is your takes it up another whole level. So we've talked a lot about your childhood, and I know that you've been open about your childhood. You were born in London to a single Chinese mother, and your dad was not in the picture.
No, he was not.
So you
never met him till about 18 months ago.
I am just curious, like, how did your parents meet, and why did they not stay together?
Right. Well, so as it turns out, back in 1967, if one person's Korean and the other person's Chinese, those two cultures,
that's a no-no.
That's a big no-no.
Well, there's lots of cultures that fit that, right?
Exactly. So maybe this is kind of a very relatable American story, but they were not allowed to get married, and it was like this very shameful thing that they were dating.
But was it a love story that was like?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
I think so.
nice.
I think so, and I think it was. There's a story there of unrequited love and heartbreak and heartache and so so I lived with my mom as a she was a single mom, and I remember sometimes opening the door and there'd be like a strange man with a suit on and a bouquet of flowers
there to court her.
Yeah, and then I would slam the door on him.
Yeah,
and say something.
I'm the man of the house
that a 3-year-old shouldn't say, and so and it wasn't until almost 2 years ago that I met him. I was like 49 or 50.
And are you still
when I met him for the first time? I am actually. As it turns out, your number one consideration. There are two considerations when you don't know one of your birth parents and you meet him for the first time as an adult. The number one consideration is, am I going to like this person, or is this person going to enter my life and be a complete drag or be a bad person? Or
were you concerned about
drama?
him liking you?
To be honest, I wasn't. But maybe that sounds. Hopefully, that doesn't sound arrogant or something. But I felt like I think that risk was off the table because he had indicated in a letter to me that he'd been following me, of all things, on Instagram the last few years.
So he's got to see Palm Springs.
He's got to see, and all kinds of stuff. And then I think that there was this is an interesting tech geek thing, but there was like an interesting bug in the way that Google was indexing public posts of Instagram, so that if you Googled someone for a few years, one of the top search results, and it didn't matter if you were getting written up in the press or something, but one of the top search results would be, whatever Instagram posts you were making. And so he found me that way, and then so I think that was off the table whether he might, because he indicated that he would love to meet up with me and all of that good stuff. So, and then I think the second consideration, at least for me, and this is clearly a testament to the fact that I'm probably a little self-absorbed here on this issue, is if you've defined your whole life a certain way, like if you believe, hey, I'm kind of the way I am, good or bad, and I'm certainly, and by the way, I've been more lucky than good in life, right? But if you've in fact defined yourself against sort of this more of a Nick Carraway versus a Jay Gatsby, you're the outsider your whole life, and you're looking in and kind of observing. If your whole life has been like that, then your birth father showing up back into your life and having that, it's almost like the universe takes a little bit of something away from you.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, that can't be your story anymore. Because you're like, I belong somewhere now.
Yeah. Oh, and this guy is a totally respectable person and a pillar of community, and
interesting,
is a doctor and has had this family.
Yeah, you're like, I guess I
like
can't hold on to that story anymore.
No, exactly, and which is totally fine. But then you start to be. It was actually sort of, I had gotten used to. Obviously, you have to, whether it's a defense mechanism or
just a way
whatever.
To
cope. You get used to the fact that life is a mystery. Like I don't have like a birth father who's genetically related to me to go to, like, as I was growing up, like, hey, I wonder if I'm going to be tall or short.
Yeah.
For most people, they go, oh, if
I'll
you're a
look
guy,
like my dad.
Look at my dad. He's tall.
Yeah.
So I think I'll probably be tall.
So you met him. So tell me about the mannerisms.
He was.
Are you the same?
We were very different. It did solve some mysteries. There is a physical resemblance. He's tall, and my mother's short, and most of the folks in her family are shorter than I am. And he was tall, and his mannerisms were different. He's much more formal than I, but he's a really nice guy, just friendly and warm, and that was a relief.
And do you think if they had met today that they would find each other?
I think so, and I don't want to speak too out of turn, but my mom's already asking me for like, oh, so
what's he up
like,
to?
are you guys texting? So like, can you give me his number? I'm like, Mom, I'm going to have to ask him first.
Are they married? Either one of them? To other people?
No, my mom is single, and he's actually going through a divorce right now.
Oh, perfect timing.
Yes.
Would that be the craziest story? That's like that'll be your second book.
I've already people have already approached me to say like, can we have cameras there when they meet for the first time again after 50 plus years?
Wait, you have to. I need to keep like on the front line on this story.
It's down to planes, trains, and automobiles at this point. It's down to logistics and text messages.
Yeah. And so I know, like, fast forward to the childhood part, I know that she also got married, and then you have a dad that you consider your dad who raised you.
So first of all, he legally adopted me, so that's why I'm an Asian guy with an Italian-American last name. He's a great guy. Yeah, Don Sposato is a great guy. I really respected that he spent the time raising me as if I was his own, and I really respect that. And when I see that out in the world, when I see these sort of compound families or nuclear families, I think the word is
blended families.
Blended families. That's right. I think that's really cool.
I think you're a person who stands for things, versus just kind of lives life.
Yeah.
And so, is that you're doing on your own, or are there things that you can look back on and say, I got this from my mom or my dad or my grandparents, all the people who influenced you along the way?
It's a great question. I'm not sure exactly where it comes from, because the fact is that lately I've been thinking a lot about how sometimes philanthropy amongst, say, folks of our generation or younger, oftentimes that's instilled at an early age, and you see the prior generation doing it, and that certainly has a huge influence. There are a lot of really wonderful people in town who are great philanthropists, precisely because they've grown up around it.
It's a value in the home.
Yeah, it's a value in the home,
or in the religion.
Exactly. I mean, I actually remember, working at Microsoft back in the day, early days when Bill Gates was still CEO, that the people in the know in the community really were talking about, like, someday he's going to be the next Rockefeller. This is years before the Gates Foundation, where they talked about how he's going to outdo everyone. He's going to outdo Rockefeller and all.
Before the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Before the Bill and Melinda, before he had even met Melinda. And they were saying that precisely because they knew that he came from a family who was already activated on philanthropy. So that being said, within that framework, I would say in some formal capacity, no, I did not get that from my parents, but I will absolutely credit them with paying attention. They paid attention to others around them, and they did volunteer work. They tended to do jobs that were nurturing. My mother was a nurse.
Yeah.
Nurse anesthetist, to be exact. She always wants me to clarify.
Well, yeah.
I'm not just a nurse. I'm a nurse anesthetist.
It is different.
That's 2 more years of school.
It is different.
Right. So that's my mom.
Yeah.
And then my dad was a hospital administrator, and his focus was in the mental health area. So I think that's probably where some of that comes from.
Right. Was education a value?
Absolutely. You can't escape it. Chinese mom, Italian dad.
Or Jewish.
Or Jewish. Same exact thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a big deal. I could not come home.
Was she a tiger mom in that way?
No, weirdly she was not. Not in a traditional sort of Chinese-American sense, but it was not allowed to come home with anything that was less than an A-. A B+ was... It was very binary.
Well, because she also
not
probably
an A.
knew you were capable. So it's like, if you're not getting an A, it's because you're not applying yourself, because you're a smart guy.
Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, that's what I say to my kids.
Maybe.
I'm like, if you're getting a B, it's because you didn't try hard enough.
Yeah.
It's not about anything else.
Yeah, I think that now that I'm a parent of a 9-year-old, I think to some extent, I'll say it this way. I think there's a lot of ego involved.
Well, yeah, because it's your little mini me.
It's your little mini me, and you're like, what do you mean you're gonna not do basketball?
Yeah.
Or what do you mean you're not
really
great at math
them.
Or whatever it is?
Yeah, no, I totally get that.
Yeah.
I totally get that. Well, that's what's going to kind of link to my next question as it relates to kind of parenting. Because if you didn't feel like you had the modeling early on, how do you know how to be a dad?
I think that's a great question. First of all, there's an assumption there that I'm a decent parent, which I'm not, and I'm already getting that every now and then. Apparently, I suck. Or
he seems pretty creative. I mean, I have not.
He's very
He seems creative, and he seems interested in tech and science
And he's hilarious, which is what I really enjoy out of the whole parenting experience, to be honest, is the funny things when he knows he's trying to be funny and he's kind of almost designing a punchline and he lands it. And it's like, that
he nailed
is
it.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
And so that's what I enjoy. But I think what it is that you always you strive for the things that you didn't have. And I think precisely because I didn't really grow up, from the age of time that I was born to the time that I was 9, which is how old he is now, I didn't have a father. I really try to lean in and spend as much time with him as possible. Which, by the way, it's helpful if you're a later, an older parent, I guess, older parent in quotes. Because you can just sort of have a little bit more malleability on the work and the career. And
you do look really young, though. I mean, the fact that you're saying 51 is
51.
It's like weird to me.
It's weird to me too.
Your success
sister.
matches 51, but your looks match more like 35.
Thank you. I'm incredibly flattered you would say that.
It's true.
Sunscreen. Sleep. Yeah.
So you grew up in Edmonds.
Yeah.
I know it said that you were like the only Asian kid. That cannot be the case anymore. Did you go to your 25-year and 30-year reunion?
Yeah. I was having such a blast by the time I was in junior high and high school. It shouldn't really be allowed. So I have no sour grapes. I was in high school. I was not the guy that got made fun of or whatever. And I did everything possible to sort of build bridges across the cliques. I was kind of that guy.
Yeah,
and
friends with everyone.
Yeah, friend. I was student.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, right.
Student body president.
Student body president. Varsity lettered in I think every sport that you could, football and every
you had the quintessential
like
American high school experience.
Yeah, so no sour grapes about that. So having said that, I also understood the journey that I went on, which was that in elementary school, it was tough, man. I think that I had not grown sort of tall.
Mm-hmm.
I was always smaller than everyone, and being the only Asian kid back in the 70s was, man, it was tough, man.
Yeah.
I got beat up.
What was the transition between elementary school and middle school? Was it just timing, or did you make a decision?
It was a ginormous pivot and rebranding exercise, Shauna. No, I'm kidding.
You're like, I'm coming back after summer with muscle.
You figure out pretty quickly how it all works with kids.
Mm-hmm.
You figure out pretty quickly, well,
they're all insecure too.
They're all insecure too. And it's like, all of a sudden, it's like, okay, so I got it. Okay, if I'm good at sports, if I'm lucky and I hit a couple of growth spurts, and if I'm a little bit funny or if I'm friendly and so I get popular, whatever all the multiple factors are.
Did you play any instruments? Guitar.
I played the guitar.
Did you play the guitar? Because my husband plays the guitar, and I'm like, Max, to my son, I'm like, you better learn that, or drums.
It helps.
Something pretty hot about that.
Exactly.
Do you still play?
No.
You guys could have a jam session.
No, but you know what? I'm the biggest geek. Like on Instagram, I follow John Mayer, and anytime he's kind of jamming and all that stuff, I always fantasize about.
So then you went to Whitman for college. How did you choose Whitman? I know it's a great school, and you're on the board.
Yeah. Right. It was a great. Well,
where else did you look? Did you look
all over? I looked all over. I'm blunt. I can be very frank about this.
Be blunt.
Yeah. There's this whole thing right now where a lot of Asian Americans are suing the Ivy Leagues because of.
I saw that. The reverse discrimination.
Reverse discrimination, which, by the way, we can bookmark that conversation. But I'm not on board with that because I think that they're strange bedfellows right now with the people that want to dismantle affirmative action, and I'm not down with that.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing that I have to say. As it turns out, if you don't get into Harvard or MIT, life is okay.
Yeah.
Your life is not going to suck.
You turned out great.
Yeah. And so I'll be really blunt. I applied to Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
I applied to MIT. I applied to Stanford. I applied to Berkeley. I applied to Whitman. I applied to UW.
How do you remember all this?
Schools. Oh, I remember. I don't forget these things. Here's what happened. I got what I've learned as a college trustee is there's a There's the blunt reject, the short letter. Then there's the longer form, soft reject. Like, you know what? You were close.
It's not you, it's me.
Yeah, it's not you, it's me. If you want to take a gap year, if you want to come back and reapply, you should do that.
Yeah.
So I got that from Harvard, got a very blunt, just a short one from MIT, I believe. I was waitlisted at Stanford, and had I known that you can, like a certain percentage can go through. But like I said, my life is not, I don't think it's different.
Right. But there are those things where you look in the rearview mirror and you're like, how would my life be different?
Yeah, right. I mean,
how would people perceive me?
I'd probably be in the Bay Area now.
But also, how would people perceive you?
That's right.
If you walk in, you're like Jonathan Sposato, Harvard, it's like, whoa.
Yeah, right, right. So yeah, exactly. So again, more Nick Carraway than Jay Gatsby. So then Whitman. Here's an interesting thing. If anybody out there who's an admissions officer or who's on a board of a college, large or small, Whitman. Not only did they admit me, but they rolled out the red carpet.
They wanted
you. And there were all kinds of sweeteners. I think there were some financial sweeteners, and some part of it is a supply and demand thing. I think that we're still seeing some trending away from small liberal arts schools. So the liberal arts schools like Whitman, the really good ones, have to work really hard to attract great students. Mm-hmm. And so and I was that 4.0. I mean, I think technically it was like a 3.8. 8.7.
But you had the resume, the application.
Yeah.
And so who were you in college? I know in high school you said you were that guy that's like on every team and
was nice to everyone.
Body president.
Yeah.
And so in college, now you come and there's kids from all over?
Yes, all over. And I actually, again, I kind of felt like a stranger in a strange land because a lot of the kids were way smarter than I at Whitman. They were way more certainly way more hip. And
but
they had
you're just a self-deprecating
person. I mean, I didn't get it. It was like there were these guys that would show up in class and they were so cool and they looked like they hadn't showered in a week. Their hair would be messed up.
Look.
Yeah, and then they're like wearing flannel and that I didn't even own a flannel shirt. This was like when the grunge thing was still happening. And then like their jeans were crappy and then like they'd always be surrounded by all the hot girls.
It's like an LA look.
Yeah, that's right. So they were and the women and the gals were like that. They were just so hip. So I drop in there. I'm like Mr. 80s man. I'm like Spandau Ballet style, like Duran Duran. I had an earring in my left ear. I was very into new wave music. And so again, stranger. And some of these kids were from really smart families. Parents were doctors, lawyers, and or sometimes the like grandparents' name was on the building.
Mm-hmm. And when you went there, what did you study in school?
I studied political science and fine art.
Interesting. And did you have a sense of what you wanted to do? Because you're a serial entrepreneur.
Kind of. I don't know if this is out there in the world anywhere. I think it is somewhere. But I was like 12 or 13 when I started writing games on the Apple II. And you have to really remember that this was back in a time when the entire quote-unquote tech industry didn't really exist, certainly not in the way that it is now, but nobody took it seriously. Like it could be a career.
Yeah,
of course,
you're just messing around.
You're just messing around. And then there were like these little game companies, like there was Synergistic Software in Renton, and there was Sirius Software in, I think they were in Northern California, and then there were companies in Oregon, like Broderbund or something like that. Then there was Electronic Arts. And anyway, I was working for Synergistic in Renton as a teenager, writing games, and number one, I was closeted about that. Like that certainly wasn't cool. That's like admitting.
Well, you can't be like Mr. New Wave, cool, edgy, fashion guy, and a tech,
and be hanging out with guys that were playing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, right? Yeah. So, but I was that. I had friends from all over. I was in retrospect, very proud of that. I think it was very fulfilling to have friends from different walks of life and in different interests. And so I would say that while I was tracking to be pre-law, and Whitman still does, I think, this wonderful 3-3 program with Columbia Law School. Columbia at the time was the number one law school in the country, and I was tracking to that. Mm. And I had a really great academic advisor at Whitman who was the chair of the political science department, who said, Graham Otten was his name, a really interesting guy, polarizing figure on campus. And he said to me during a one-on-one session, he goes, Jonathan, you could be a lawyer, but is that what you really want to do?
So
And I think that, and so that really gave me pause. My dad sort of set me up with some lawyer friends of his that I talked with, and at the time, it's a very fulfilling career for a lot of people, don't get me wrong, but at the time...
I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, even just on the podcast, who were gonna go law,
right, gonna go law,
pivoted.
Yeah, they pivoted.
And they're really happy that they did.
Right, exactly. But all these lawyer friends of my dad's that I talked with, they either wanted to retire or they wanted to buy a bar. And so I'm like, something's going on here where it's not really what they want to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that is
and
the
it's
first proof
expensive.
point.
Like if you don't want to go that, and so many years of studying,
right. And my parents got divorced right as during my senior year. So I'm like, let me figure stuff out before I go commit myself to 3 more years of school and student debt and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that was the first proof point right there, Shauna, that that I am chronically unemployable.
And so I started by asking you about kind of your interest in business, because this whole next part of our conversation is going to be like, okay, seriously, you have this company, that company. I mean, you did so many companies in a row. You had Microsoft in there, and it's unbelievable. I mean, that whole period of time in your 20s was, I don't even know where to begin on that. Because when I started,
I see. Yeah.
I mean, Fat Bits, Picnic, I mean, it's endless. And so how did you know what you were doing? Where did you learn?
I think it's amazing what you can do when you're completely naive and stupid. When no one tells you that you're not supposed to do something. Seriously. Like, I think if you don't, I think it's
like ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is bliss. I think when you don't have guideposts. Now, I've since learned that there is, in fact, a limit, especially having become a parent.
And also an investor.
And an investor.
Right, you're not going to invest in the person that's like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think that these days I've learned some lessons the hard way that you cannot do it all. But I think it's a combination like all great entrepreneurs do, and you're a great business owner, Shauna. You do have a certain amount of ambition to do more, to seize opportunities. You actually experience FOMO if you feel like the train is leaving and you're like, okay. So Geekwire is a great example. Like there was this feeling that, hey, and again, 8 years ago, we started it. 8 years ago, the tech industry here in Seattle was very different, but there was this feeling like, I bet you the community needs to come together and be codified and be given a voice and coalesce, but in a way that's different. There's a different voice. There's an edgier, more interesting way that we can celebrate geekdom and the tech industry and have it also be more inclusive. That was always be part of the plan, diversity and inclusion, although we didn't have that formal term. It was, having 2 amazing business partners like John Cook and Todd Bishop, and away we went. So that's a great example.
I love those. I love all of you guys, and I feel connected to Geekwire. I love you guys. So, but break it down from the very beginning. So when you graduated from Whitman, did you know what you wanted to do? Did you know where you were going?
I knew that I'll be blunt. I knew that I was motivated by getting a very, very high ROI on my efforts. When my parents got divorced and I decided not to opt out of going to law school, I decided that I would go into as a career, which was really, again, not something that people thought about at the time, in the games industry. So I did start the games company with 3 other business partners. There were 4 of us, and we grew very quickly to about 41 people in a couple of years' time. And we did games for Nintendo, both the 8-bit NES and the 16-bit SNES, and the Sega Genesis, and the PC and the Mac and all of that stuff. And we had a ton of we got work really fast. And that was really actually my first startup. Yeah. And I learned about payroll and managing teams and all that
Keeping
stuff.
people fed. So here's the question for you. So you've got these 3 other co-founders. How was it a chicken and egg thing where you found the co-founders and then came up with the idea, or you had the idea and then went and found the co-founders? Or I want to know about those exact
it's hard to
early
remember.
days.
I think there was always a belief that there was an opportunity to create a games development company that at the time, I mean, we were so kind of naive and also somewhat arrogant that we thought that the way to do it right was to have really effective project management and to be really organized and be really upfront with our customers like Nintendo and Sega about how much it would cost, and we'd be upfront with them about what our profit margins were. And because at the time, it was really a crazy wild frontier. So I think that there was always an idea to do something, and then almost simultaneous, the idea, these conversations were happening with the people who would then become my business partners.
Got it.
And so that time was really, I kind of joked that it was my MBA.
Well, for sure.
Yeah. You're learning about how to run a business, and frankly, you're learning the soft stuff, which is like how to get along with business partners, where
how to let people follow you. And...
Yeah.
So did you have clearly defined roles?
We did have clearly defined roles. We had, I was the creative director and managed anybody that was not writing code. So designing UI, animation. At the time, we had it was kind of parsed into, there was like people who were like background. It was almost like in the animation movie days, where people who only did background paintings and matte paintings versus the people that did the character design. It was similar. There was one person, Ivan, who did a lot of the business development and had the relationships with the companies. Although I did some of that too. There was my business partner Doug, who managed anyone that wrote code. He was sort of the CTO, or managed engineering. And then there was Carol, who headed up sort of the anything that was written, writing, the copy, specs, things like that.
If I was hiring you today,
yeah,
and which role would I put you in? Because to me, from where I sit, you're kind of good at everything. You're definitely front-facing. You're definitely somebody I would say should be in front of customers and should be the kind of voice of the company. But you've got a ton of skills. Where would you be as far as in the C-suite?
Yeah.
What would your job be?
I think functionally, well, other than being president of the Shauna Swirlin fan club, that's a job
really
that you could put me in.
You can have a donut after this.
Okay. Awesome.
You've been a good boy.
Okay, thank you. But functionally, I'm really a product guy.
You're really
product, brand, and yes, business development. Look, I'm probably less. I can do operations, but a lot of times I feel like that as a company scales, you get to 85, 100 people. I think you're smart to bring in a really savvy
what would you
operator.
Hate doing? Like if I give you a task, you're just like, please, no, I suck at this and I don't like doing it.
That's a great question. I just think I'm not always the best person at it, which is. Sort of the analysis on the financials. And there are some people who are really good at, like, for when you're prepping for a board meeting, they can have some really insightful, thought-provoking insights about the financials for the quarter and trending differences. Very subtle nuances, trending differences between retention rate and renewal rate, and I find that stuff frankly very fascinating.
Well,
but
it's nice
I'm not
when you
quick
can tell
at
it as a story. I like it if somebody can summarize where my business is and tell it in story form. But not when I'm just looking at a P&L and trying to understand. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I love hearing about it. I love consuming that information and having someone tell me, like, hey, we did an ABC test, and as it turns out, if we change pricing to look like this versus that, you may think you get higher in conversion at mid funnel, but they don't renew a year later. Like I find that's stuff fascinating, but I can't look at an analytics dashboard
or create a financial model
and see it very quickly.
Where was Microsoft in all of this?
So Microsoft was after the games company.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So is that where you met Heather?
That's right.
Okay, because I think she told me that.
Yes, that's right.
And how long were you there, and what was that culture like for
I was
you?
there from 92, I think the end of 92 or mid to end of 92 to 2004. So I was there for 12 years, and I saw it go through quite an interesting arc. And I would say that in the beginning days, the culture was amazing. And here's the
How
thing
many people were there when you joined?
well, it felt like in Redmond, just the people that were doing product, the company was larger because it had product support and marketing and manufacturing and all that stuff in different offices. But in Redmond, it felt like that it was like 1,000, maybe 1,200 people. You knew everyone. And certainly if you look at the number of people in product development, like the people that actually wrote code, that wrote specs, were program managers, engineers, designers, it was a much smaller
And
number.
you all knew each other. And
We all knew each
how
other,
would you define the
mostly.
culture?
I would define it as a meritocracy. I would define it as a great deal of fun. I would say that it was rigorous. It was intellectually challenging. It was the best company and a best job. I have to always bite my tongue when I hear someone from Facebook or if you go back another 10 years, someone from Google or someone from Amazon, I always have to bite my tongue when they talk about like, oh, this is the company. Yes, yeah, this company is great. We move fast, we innovate, we break things. It's like, yeah, the Matrix has rebooted like about 4 times now. And I'm sure back at Microsoft, there were probably people at IBM saying, oh, you kids think you're cute, but this has happened before.
Right.
But I think any high growth, successful tech company, you're going to have that culture. I think it's successful precisely because you had a culture of moving fast, being agile, not bureaucratic, disruptive, innovative, rewarding anyone, regardless of title and level at the company, for doing great work.
I love it. And the people who worked there in those days seem to have a whole nother level of energy around talking about it.
Yeah,
that it
you'll
just
notice that.
Really feels different.
Yeah.
I'm slightly jealous because I left Seattle in 94 and a lot of friends went there. Some are still there that have just been there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would have gone, but it seems like a really
you would have been great
experience.
there. You would have been great there. You would have you would have loved it and they would have loved you. And now here's
I've heard
blunt
today
and
it's a
candid.
little bit more political. Like you have to kind of learn your way around and
It got political,
way?
I would say, back in around 97 is when it started to feel like, oh, now
I have to watch my back.
we have to expend energy on that other stuff. And I'm going to be blunt about that. And I'm sorry if people feel otherwise. There are certainly people who are there who've been very successful. And I tell them, hey, you figured it out, man.
Yeah. It might just not
stay
be your
there
person.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
Just don't retire and do a startup. Just round the horn, man.
Yeah.
You figured it out. You survived. There's some sort of what I can't remember what the term is in natural selection. Like if you exhibit the traits that make you successful here for 25 years. Yeah.
And I am curious how you find talent because you do surround yourself with really incredible people. Is there a consistent I like this type of trait?
I like people who are sort of Renaissance people who are not afraid to color outside the lines and that they have other things going on in their lives besides just their functional area. And here's why that's really important. I actually think that for businesses to break out and have a competitive advantage, you need to create a certain kind of alchemy. You need to always ask the question, well, what happens if instead of looking at this as a typical consumer internet SaaS, a subscription business, what happens if I look at it as almost like a game, like an experience? Or what happens if I look at it, if I apply some things that I'm noticing in the arts? What happens if I apply what I know about playing the guitar to how I design this UI, right?
Interesting.
And so I think... And frankly, that's a very Whitman College liberal arts answer. This is the very value of liberal arts, which is what happens when you synthesize and you're not just computer science only, or you're not just law, or you're not just any one thing. And so I tend to be really attracted to people and tend to hire folks who are very not just well-rounded, but can exhibit talent across different disciplines. I think it's highly interesting. You're like that, Shauna. Some of our mutual friends are like that, where you find out wait, you're like a national level ballet dancer,
Right.
and you're really awesome at this.
Right. Passionate people.
Yeah.
People who are
passionate people.
engaged.
Yeah.
People who are like woke.
Right, right.
Just kind of living.
That's right.
Fully living.
Yeah.
So tell me about your other startups and how you came up with the ideas and how you raised funds
Yeah.
and what that experience was like, because now you're an investor.
Yeah, right.
So you probably have a lot of empathy
Yeah.
for the people going through this
Yes,
and
I do.
presenting their ideas.
Yeah.
Some investors have no operating experience.
No.
And so the
no.
fact that you have that, I'm sure makes you a better partner as an investor.
I hope so. I think it does when I do invest, but it might make me a little more. It might make me more precious and sort of hardcore. That's why I'm not. I'm not someone who's invested in like 40 different companies. It's more like 15.
Right.
So to answer your question, I think I tend to look for or favor ideas or startups where it's not just. Or I'll say it this way: where the problem you're solving is really crystal clear, and there's an elegance to both the problem scope, that the size of the problem, you're not trying to boil the ocean, in other words, and
I like that term.
Yeah, and the solution fits just right, and it doesn't, because I think sometimes we get a little too. Entrepreneurs get a little too precious, and they should be very ambitious, of course, but sometimes we self-define as like, well, in order for me to tackle this problem, maybe it's not that sexy, it's not that glamorous, so I'm going to make it into a big thing.
And so, but what about your companies?
Yeah.
Like what problem were you originally solving, and was that the problem that you were solving when you sold them?
Right. Yes. So Fatbits was 100% about something not that glamorous, but we kind of put a more sexy spin on it, which was.
But the name is cool.
Yeah, the name is cool, right? It's there was this kind of interesting gray area between the desktop and traditional downloadable executable apps like
I'm like,
Office.
No,
Yeah, right. And there's a gap between that stuff, the desktop and the cloud and the internet. So I felt like that Fatbits was really filling that gap, that these were these quick, very, very easily created XML widgets that could live on your desktop but also communicate to the web, and we created this platform where people could create these little XML widgets in a really delightful way, and they would be cute and fun and make you smile. In fact, that was our tagline: "Did your desktop make you smile today?" And or make you happy today, actually. So that filled a niche. Picnic was 100% about photo editing. Wow. It cost $700 at the time to buy a copy of Photoshop, and man, that thing is hard to use and sits on your shelf because you don't use it, and it takes 45 minutes to just do a crop and some effect, and so and then the other win was that we did Picnic in a browser. This was the first time that you could have a really rich client-like application that's highly interactive with photo effects in a browser. So what a total change, that instead of having to buy Photoshop to edit your photos, you just open up your browser, go www.picnic.com and edit your photos right away, instantly.
Yeah.
And so those are examples of where you're just like, it wasn't like I'm trying to change your entire life.
With?
We were competing with Adobe, which if I had a nickel for every time someone said, you cannot go into this space, it's like, I'm going to create this word processor and then compete with Word. Well, as it turns out in technology, when there is a paradigm shift in platform, you can get away with that.
Yeah.
Now, Adobe still, obviously, they're a successful company with all kinds of different things, different lines of revenue. Photoshop still exists in different instantiations, although the most successful ones now look a lot like they're very web-based, right? So,
yeah. And are you into photography?
I am.
Yeah. So do you feel that in order to get behind a company, either as the entrepreneur or the investor, that you have to be into what it is, or just see an opportunity?
No, not necessarily. I think you have. I would say it this way. I think you have to be a student of it, but you don't have to be great at it. Like, for example, I would invest in a an online fashion. In fact, I have.
Yeah, but that's your.
But even if the founder himself or herself was not fashionable per se, but if that person was really paying attention and trying to understand the customer behavior, that counts.
Yeah, that does count. And so we have so many things to talk about because you're fascinating. You might have to be on twice. I'm like, Jonathan, really? Okay, so
Happy to come back.
We have the business part, but I actually want to dive deeper into kind of what drove you as an investor 2 years ago to only invest in female co-founded or founded companies. And this is huge.
Yeah.
And your involvement in the Riveter. I mean, it's all just kind of...
So I think a lot of people are now saying the same things I'm saying, and which is great. There's a lot more female entrepreneurs who are saying, kind of repeating the same data points that I was saying a couple of years ago, so the things that led me were that, like less than 3%, it's 2.7% of all venture capital funding is allocated to female-founded startups.
Right.
There are clear differences, and we have to acknowledge it. Equality doesn't mean that men and women are the same. It means that they have the same opportunities. So the thing that we have to acknowledge is that Harvard thing where if you're the same identical pitch deck, the same business, same startup company, if a man is pitching it versus a woman, the man is 68% more likely to get funded than the woman. Right. And that has to do with the Carol Gilligan in a different voice stuff, all that research that goes back 25 years about how boys and girls, we bifurcate at an early age in terms of how we communicate. And somehow in society, we bias towards a more male communication as being more authoritative, as being more leader-like, as being more trustworthy. So that's why there are no major national level female news anchors. Right. It's always Tom Brokaw or a Lester Holt or, you get it. So it's that stuff that I was trying to highlight and to also solve for. I wasn't trying to be there have been some mean things said about me since, and that's fine. I'm thick-skinned. It's fine.
Haters gonna hate.
Haters gonna hate. And in fact, it's not just from men. By the way, there are women who also sort of question my motives and
I have
why
heard
is he
that.
saying
I've
that?
actually heard a woman say
I want to
that
better
to me,
understand
and
that.
I defended you because I was like, not just because you're a woman, so suddenly
exactly.
I'm going to
I
open
get
up my
it.
wallet.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. I didn't say I was going to invest in every single female-founded company. I said I would from now on myself. Of the ones that I invest in, they're all going to be female.
Well, and you're also saying this is a problem, and also there's a direct correlation between success and having a woman either on the board or at the helm. As far as there's a lot of stats around it.
They're just adding 3 women to your board of directors increases your profitability by 26%.
Right. So those numbers alone, I mean, you're not doing this from a social work perspective. You're doing it because you're an investor.
I would say it's both. I think that I'm getting both what I think long-term will prove out a higher return on my investment because I think, first of all, I'm a bit of a contrarian investor anyway, and I think that's consistent with the way that I've talked about my life. That's more Nick Carraway than Jay Gatsby. You do the thing that's kind of a little more unexpected or outside. So I think that there's going to be some interesting results in a few years, I hope.
But
and
you're
if there
also
aren't, that's fine too.
Like in the arena. You're in there as opposed to just on the sidelines talking about how we need to change this.
Yeah, right.
You're actually doing something.
Yeah.
And I love that you also, your book has key takeaways of what you can do. Even just the changing of the hours. Because sometimes I'm trying to help my clients and I'll reference your book because I'm like, I don't have all the answers. I know as a woman, I love having other female executives. There's like a handful of us.
Right.
But you're giving key takeaways of ways that companies can kind of help women lean in and help women continue to engage in wanting to be in business.
Exactly. And I appreciate that, Shauna, because if I have one thing that I want to sort of get off my chest recently is and I hate it when people speak in platitudes and everything's, hunky-dory. It's because it's not, right? If I had one thing to get off my chest, it is this sense that, look, I'm doing what I'm doing because I believe in it. And if you're cynical about that, I'm sorry you're cynical. Move along.
Yeah.
Nothing to see here. I'm not trying to be patronizing. I've had some real, and this is in a very minor, it's like, I'm thinking 1% or something, but smart, educated white women tell me it's really patronizing to see a man talk about these issues. It just is patronizing. There are days when it, it's funny how your subconscious works. There are days when the phrase "no good deed goes unpunished" pops into my head. And by the way, I get it that it's optically, it looks like, oh, if you don't read my book and if you don't know anything about my backstory, it looks like, it just appears like, here's a man who's maybe privileged, and I've never defined myself that way as a non-white
of course, but
person.
as an outsider.
Yeah, as an outsider. But here's a man who's privileged, who's somehow mansplaining to women what they can do better. That is not what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I'm talking to the men. I'm talking to the 97% of all CEOs who are male. I'm talking to 93% of all board members in corporate America who are male, to the 88% of all elected officials who are male. I'm talking to them about how they can make more room and do better.
Okay, so here's what I want to ask you. It's a very Oprah question. What would you tell the 22-year-old Jonathan? What advice would you give?
Relax.
What advice would you give?
Relax.
Yeah. Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And I also want to give you an opportunity to talk about your involvement with United Way campaign.
Oh, thank you.
Because I'm really excited that you guys are doing that.
Yeah.
And that you
Us
and
too.
Heather have stepped up in our community once again. Super grateful.
Thank you.
Tell us how we can help besides donate. Like, how can we get involved?
Yeah, exactly. So donating is one way. Volunteering is clearly another. But I think the statement here is that I honestly can't find a more powerful and better platform for transforming our city than a United Way of King County. So again, I'm going to be really blunt. If you don't trust a city to spend your money, if you don't trust the state to spend your money, if you don't agree with a tent encampment on a sidewalk near your house or office, there are so many ways that we can say no. Here's what you can say yes to. You can say yes to the organization that gets it, and that you can say yes to the organization that where 94 cents of every dollar that you give goes directly to someone in need. You can say yes to an organization that's proven over the years to have these great programs that effectively work to divert people off the streets and into being sheltered, that connects people to who are poverty-stricken, their young kids to education, who helps people get jobs and remain financially stable. I can go on and on about all of the good that the United Way of King County does. And they frankly just don't have a lot of, they don't get a lot of press and frequent press
well, now
about
they
their
will,
good work.
because now we've got you helping.
That's
we
right.
appreciate that. So what is your goal?
Yeah. Well, the goal this year is to raise money to continue to support Streets to Home program. There's the Parent-Child Home program, which is very effective. And there's also Jobs Connect, they're all very, very effective programs that are making big dents in a lot of the problems in our city, in our backyard. And we can catch up. Yeah, more people became homeless this year than last year, but the rate of growth has actually started to slow. And they're slowing precisely because these problems are working, and we need to support these problems.
So speaking of Heather, and we have to kind of wrap up, but I have a whole lot of questions around that because she's incredible. I'm just curious. I know you guys met at Microsoft and you have Holden. What do you hope for him?
I hope that in 10 years when he is in college, that issues like gender or the fact that women felt less than or that they worked in environments where they were not free of sexual harassment or gender discrimination, I would hope that for him in 10 years, those issues are not, they're things of the past. I also hope that we leave the earth a better place, that I actually shed tears. I actually welled up when I read the recent report about how, in fact, we were wrong about climate change and the rate of change, and that, in fact, things are going to, in 10 years, going to be warmer by 1.5 degrees, which is a big effing deal.
It's a big problem.
Yeah, and I worry a lot about that, and that we are not doing enough there. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we need more Jonathans. Seriously, Jonathan. Well, thank you. I'm not doing anything near what you're doing, and it's incredibly inspiring. And I'm grateful. And I'm so glad that I get to know you and that you got to spend time with me today.
Yeah, me too. This was fun.
I'm probably going to make you come back because
you bet.
You're layered like an onion.
like Shrek.
Onion in a good way. I like onions.
Cool. This
Sweet
is very
onion.
cool.
As a Walla Walla sweet.
Yes, that's right. Very good. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.